Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So no location video this week unfortunately, so I am coming to you from my little tiny home office. Just want to make a bit of an announcement to start with, to be honest with you. Across the 4-day Easter weekend I am going to be releasing a video each day. So on the Friday and the Sunday we will be getting a wildlife video dropping onto the channel, and on the Saturday and Monday it will be a landscape photography one as well. So a little bit of a surprise and a Brucey bonus for you guys. Also as well, a couple of other things that we're going to be looking at coming to the channel soon. First of all, we are going to be looking at releasing extra videos also on the May bank holidays as well. Some little bank holiday bonuses. Also as well, there may be some times when we actually start releasing 2 videos a week. Don't hold your breath on that one. It all depends how much we can obviously get out with the camera. With the way the weather and stuff has been at the moment, it's not been easy. Me and Mrs S have been out. We've been trudging around a couple of places, and unfortunately there's just been nothing that's worth grabbing on the camera. So this week's video anyway, I wanted to talk about wildlife photography and the fact that you don't need to spend a small fortune to actually make a break into wildlife photography. Now, this video is probably more aimed at those people who are looking at getting their first cameras, who have got a ranging budget from someone who's probably got quite a small budget right the way through to someone who's got a slightly larger budget without looking at breaking the bank. So without further ado, let's talk about cameras. So before I actually come on to the topic of cameras, what I want to actually say is, when doing this video, I actually went on to Wex Photo Video to have a look at their used items. Now, one of the reasons that I went on to Wex was purely because they offer a 12-month warranty with all of their used gear, unless stated otherwise. Now, this video has no affiliation to Wex at all. I have no affiliation to Wex either. It is a UK based site. I'm not sure if they do ship internationally, but it was just a good starting point. There are other great used camera companies out there as well. MPB is quite a popular one. LCE, the London Camera Exchange, that's another one as well that I've used on several occasions. The Sony A7R4 actually came from them, so I do know them to be reputable as well. I have used MPB in the past also. Let's talk about cameras then. Now, one of the key things that you want to look at on a camera when you're buying used, and all of these cameras that we're going to discuss are based on used prices. Now, one of the reasons for this is because you can get a lot more for your money buying used, and obviously if you are just starting out, you don't know whether wildlife photography is going to be something that you're going to become heavily invested in. It's better to buy used, especially when you're looking at somewhere like Wex, the fact that they offer a 12-month warranty as well. One of the key things then, as say, looking at a camera when buying used, is you want to find out what the shutter count is. Now, the reason this is important is because it shows how many pictures have actually gone through the camera, and every camera's mechanical shutter has an actions rating, meaning how many pictures that shutter can take on average before it breaks. Now, it's always good to do a little bit of research into the camera that you're looking at buying and find out exactly what your shutter is going to be rated at. If you're looking at something that is either near to or has exceeded that, it's maybe best to steer clear. However, I have had cameras in the past that have gone well over the expected shutter actions, and it's carried on fine. I have also bought cameras in the past where the shutter has gone, and it is a real big frustration. So the first camera I want to look at then, and this is going in at the lowest price point, is the original Canon 7D. Now, the cameras that I am going to be recommending are all by Canon. There are other great used equipment as well by companies like Nikon, where they will do something of an equivalent model. Unfortunately, my knowledge of Nikon isn't great. I do come from a Canon background, but this is just to give me an example that you can get into wildlife photography on a budget. Now, the 7D is a great little compact camera. It comes in at a great price point. It is an old camera, so trying to find one with a low shutter count might be quite difficult. I can speak from experience. I still have my original 7D. I have absolutely hammered this camera. It was my first major camera. I did have a lot of cameras. Prior to that, I had things like a 350D, a 40D, a 50D. I may even have one or two others. I had a 1D Mark II in there as well before buying that 7D. Now that 7D has been all over the place with me. It's done various types of photography, from things such as weddings, graduations and various other things. Now, when you're looking at the 7D from a wildlife photography perspective, it does have Canon's cropped sensor, meaning that it is, when you're looking at lenses, the focal length of a lens is rated at a what they call 35mm or full frame equivalent. Now, because the 7D comes with a 1.6 crop, what that actually means is it is a smaller sensor. However, it does mean that it will allow you to get closer to the action because it gives you a longer field of view. So when you're looking at lenses, if you take that longest focal length, let's just say 400mm, you can times that by 1.6 and it will give you that equivalent focal length with the field of view from a crop sensor. Now, I loved my 7D. It's a great place to start. Compared to modern technology, it is very old, but if you're looking for a cheap camera to get started into wildlife photography, I can highly recommend the 7D. So next up on the list then is its older brother, the Canon 7D Mark II. Now, this was quite a leap in development against the older 7D. Obviously, it does come in at a higher price point for those with a little bit more of a budget and looking to get into wildlife photography. I also can speak from experience. I still have my 7D Mark II. Now, one of the great features that it actually came with compared to the original 7D is it does have dual memory card slots. It has space for an SD and a CF card as well. Now, while CF cards are less prominent nowadays in the mirrorless world, you can still get them. It does come with a decent sized upgraded sensor. It's just a genuinely fantastic camera when you're looking at starting out in something like wildlife photography. As an entry level, it's actually more of an intermediate camera. Back in the day, it was lauded as a great place to start for wildlife photography, for sports photography, for action photography. It does come with a reasonable frames per second shooting speeds on there as well. So yeah, I can highly recommend the 7D Mark II as your first camera for wildlife photography. Okay, so the final camera I just want to mention now is, it's another digital SLR as well. We're starting to move into the price point of lower end second-hand mirrorless cameras, but it is one that I would like to just bring up as well, and that was Canon's flagship 1DX series cameras. Now, with the 1DX, what you got was an amalgamation of two 1D series. So they used to have the two channels. One was designed as a full frame, was designed for portraiture, things like that, weddings. The other was more about speed. Now, they're both professional level cameras, or they were at the time. Obviously, technology has moved on, but they're still fantastic cameras, and you can pick them up for a real steal if you want something with a real pro feel. The 1DX was an 18 megapixel full frame sensor. So unlike the 7Ds with their crop sensors, it is a full frame sensor. And one thing about it as well is that it will shoot at 12 frames a second in RAW full frame. Now, that is absolutely fantastic, and it's brilliant for wildlife photography as well. Now, I had to actually go on to MPB to actually check out the pricing of this because I couldn't find a decent one on Wex. So as I said before, MPB is another reputable second-hand camera retailer. Absolutely fantastic. I have used them in the past. But yeah, you're looking at around the sort of £750 mark, and as a result, it is starting to push that budget a little bit higher. I would probably recommend spending more of your budget on good glass rather than the higher end camera. But if you've got a bit of money to burn, the 1DX is a fantastic place to look. Right, let's talk about lenses now. Now, lenses is a real minefield, because even when you're invested into a camera system such as Canon, you've got a big variety of lens manufacturers that you can actually choose from. Not only do you have Canon, but you also have Tamron, you have Sigma, you have Tokina, and this whole big vast world of lenses. It can become a bit of a minefield, and trying to look for something that you can use for wildlife photography, you may just end up in a big swamp, overwhelmed by all of these lenses. So I'm going to run through a few examples now of good lenses at various price points. Now, what I would say with lenses is, in an ideal world, you want to be looking at something that's at least 300mm at its longest focal length. I'm not going to talk about primes today, because primes start coming in at a totally different price point, and we are talking about getting into wildlife photography for various budgets, more on the lower end rather than the higher end. If you have a high budget, the world is your oyster. But if you are looking at just getting into wildlife photography, this is where we're sort of looking at. As I say, you want to be looking at the longest end of your focal length to be at least 300mm. Ideally, you want to be moving into the 400mm, if not further, if you can get it. Now, that one thing to remember I mentioned before with cameras is, if you are buying something like a 7D, which is an APS-C size sensor, and it gives you an additional crop factor, remember that longer focal length, you are timesing it by that crop factor. And as I say, with the 7D series, Mark 1 and 2, it's a 1.6 crop factor. So you do get longer out of these lower lenses with the shorter focal length, is what I'm trying to say. Let's have a look at a few lenses at different price points. Okay, so the best budget lens I could probably recommend is this one. Now, the reason we are looking at this is it's the cheapest lens that I'm going to talk about now. However, it does have a few nice little features that you can pick up, and it is a bit of a bargain at this kind of price point. The fact that it actually goes to a focal length of 300mm in full frame equivalent means you will get that extra reach of around 450mm off the top of my head. That's if you times it by 1.5. So you are getting a fair bit of reach with this lens. Not only that, you also get image stabilization as well. Now, the lens is quite lightweight, but to also have that added advantage of image stabilization can be a real bonus, especially if you're working on bird portraiture. Now, moving up to the next lens then, you're going to be looking at something like an older Sigma 150 to 500. Now, I believe these lenses did also come with image stabilization as well, but one thing I will say is that it's an older lens. It's not going to give you the same results as some of the newer lenses, like the Sigma 150 to 600 Contemporary or Sport. This is one of the older Sigma lenses. They were a bit hit and miss, I will be honest with you, before they went for their global imaging range, where you've got the Contemporary, the Art, and then the Sport range. But you know what? To get a 500mm length lens, or further if you take into that consideration that crop factor as well, that would give you about 750mm effective field of view used on one of the 7Ds that I mentioned earlier. So it's one that would get you right out there and up close with the birds. It's a great place to be for a wildlife lens, especially if you're on a restricted budget. Now, the next lens I want to mention is one that I have actually owned previously, which was before I even got into any form of wildlife photography. I wanted something with a long focal length, and that is the Mark 1 Canon 100 to 400. It's an L series lens as well, and you can pick them up for a real bargain. I did sell mine. However, it wasn't anything to do with the lens. It was just the fact that I wasn't utilizing it. Oh, how times have changed. However, it's a great lens. It comes with image stabilization, the build quality, the image quality. It's a fantastic lens. One that I would recommend if your budget will stretch to that. Paired with a 7D Mark II, this is a fantastic combination when you are dipping your toes into the wildlife photography field, and something that will yield good results. So my final bit of advice then, when you are looking at entering into the wildlife photography field, is making that decision of which do you spend the more money on, camera or lens. Now, I would always spend more money on good glass than I would on a camera body. Now, if I had to actually make a decision, if I had sort of around £1,000 budget getting into this, I would most definitely look at spending the money on the Canon 7D Mark II and also the Canon 100 to 400. It might just break that £1,000 budget, but it's a fantastic combination when you're starting out in the wildlife photography. Don't feel bad if your budget will not stretch to that. We all start somewhere, and going for the original Canon 7D and the 70 to 300, I would highly recommend those as a great starting point if your budget is not that big. Don't feel bad. Don't think, oh, I won't bother because, you know, I don't have the money to buy the best kit. Buy the starter kit, as it were. Get out and practice. Eventually, if you have some further spare income, go out and buy the better lenses. Go out and buy the better bodies. But it's a great starting point. So, that's it for this week's video. It's just to give a little bit of insight that you don't have to spend a small fortune to get into wildlife photography. I know it's rich coming from me. I've only just started my wildlife photography journey, and I have got a Sony A7R IV and the Sigma 150 to 600mm sport lens. I will confess, the A7R IV is because I do landscape photography. The 150 to 600mm lens, it was a 40th birthday present to myself. It was a treat. I didn't actually realise how much wildlife photography I would end up doing and how much I actually enjoy doing it. But here we are. You know, it's rich coming from me saying, oh, buy the budget stuff, buy the budget stuff. If you are just starting out, you're not a working professional, it's just a hobby. Don't blow a huge amount of money for the camera and lens not to be used. Don't regret the decisions you make. If you can, as I say, only afford that starter setup of the 7D and the 70-300, so be it. The best thing you can do is get out there and shoot some wildlife. It is a fantastic hobby to have, and one I'm sure you will love. So, as I say, that's it from this week's video. Obviously, do give us the old thumbs up and drop some subscribes as well. As I say, we have our Easter weekender coming. That's 4 videos in 4 days, which is the equivalent of a month's worth of videos from me. So yeah, do like and subscribe. And obviously, this is my account. Take care. Be safe, everyone. Peace.